Good morning and welcome to this service of Unity of Boerne Online in this beautiful, wonderful location that I decided to record today because it's a place I like to come and think and meditate and pray, and it's beautiful. And this is sort of a special day because I'll be talking about something that goes back in my life for a number of years, and it's something I'm excited to share. But I'd like to tell you that when Unity of Boerne we congregate, and we don't know exactly the time that's going to be, we're located at 121 Scenic Loop Road in Boerne. Our Sunday morning book discussion is at 9:30, followed by our worship service at 11. Give you a cordial invitation to come be part of the house that love built. This is a wonderful, wonderful group of people full of loving energy and an intention to help you along your spiritual path. So I give you a warm invitation to join us. I believe you'll be glad you did. What we do on Sunday mornings is recite our mission statement, and I have done that through this time that we've been not being able to congregate, to help us remember that even though we may be apart right now, our core values unite us. And our mission statement at Unity of Boerne is that we are a vibrant, loving, spiritual community, providing a sacred space for personal growth. We honor and celebrate the Christ within all people. And I would like to read the daily word because, as I told you before, it's something that the worship sisters get to do and on the usual Sunday, and I'll miss not being able to do that again. I love it because it has meant so much in my life for so many years. The daily word for Sunday, May 31st, 2020 is love. I am a loving presence to everyone I meet. It has been said that the world needs more love. The truth is that all the love in the world could ever need, the truth is that all the love the world could ever need is already present everywhere because God is love and God is present everywhere. Created in God's image, I am divine love in human expression. I know that love is much more than a positive feeling. Divine love is the energy of oneness itself. As I remain centered in divine love, I know oneness in God with all people, including those who are dear to me and those I've never met. Divine love helps me see good everywhere and in everyone. I look beyond conflict and limitation and find the good that is always mine to discover. The scripture reading is from 1 John chapter 4, verse 7. Beloved, let us love one another because love is from God. Everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. And I think that's a particularly appropriate daily word in light of what I'd like to talk about today. And in messages, I tend to shy away from the autobiographical because many people have stories. Everybody has a story, and it's uniquely personal to us, and I seek to fulfill ministry in a way that reaches as many people as I can with the message that I'm led to give. But today I'm going to deviate from that just a little bit. This Sunday, May 31st, is the birth date of a man that meant a lot to me in my spiritual development. May 31st, 1898, Dr. Norman Vincent Peale was born. And I think most of you know that name, but for those of you who don't, let me tell you that he was a wonderful, eloquent, kind, dynamic, and energetic man that started out in life with a really bad inferiority complex. He was very shy. And his father continually worked with him to try to get him over this. And in college, his professors did the same thing. He said they would call on him and he would just freeze in place because he felt like he was too nervous to give an answer. And to give you a little background, he wrote a best-selling book called The Power of Positive Thinking. and that was published by Prentice Hall in 1952, which is an interesting story in itself. But let's go back to the more or less to the beginning. In the early part of last century, there were authors that took New Thought principles and made them amenable and appealing to mass audience. And I've always admired someone who can take a complex idea and boil it down to the rudiments of what it is. And in 1935, for example, or even before that, the author Napoleon Hill wrote The Laws of Success. I think that was in the 20s. In the 30s, he wrote a book called Think and Grow Rich that many of you are familiar with, and it wasn't just about money, by the way. In the 30s, later in the 30s came Dale Carnegie with his wonderful book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. In the late 40s came Claude Bristol with his The Magic of Believing. And in 1952, Dr. Norm Vincent Peale published The Power of Positive Thinking. That wasn't the end of New Thought being extrapolated for the mass audience, but it certainly was a very signal moment because it was on the bestseller list, his book, for about, I think it was 3 years running straight. And this is where I get a lot of autobiographical. In I was in my father's storeroom to help him clean out some things. I was there alone. I was not particularly enjoying it. It was a hot day, and I had to fulfill this promise. So there were boxes of books and all kinds of things in that storeroom, and it was separated from the house. There was no air conditioning, anything like that. And I found an old crate, Pepsi-Cola crate, and I sat down on it and I began to go through these books to see what, may be interesting. And there was one with a red spine, and it caught my eye. And it turned out to be The Power of Positive Thinking. Now, this is the one that I've had for many years because that paperback fell apart. And one of the things that I like so much is that one of the original advertising flyers for it, which is much smaller and an abridgment, came with this particular edition. And I was very, very moved by sitting there and opening the pages of that and seeing a religious leader say at the very beginning of the book, believe in yourself, have faith in your abilities. Without a humble yet reasonable self-confidence, it's impossible for you to succeed. Now, here was a man that wasn't coming down heavy with religious sentiment, religious ideals that, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but he was speaking in a universal way to many people, certainly was speaking to me. I sat in the storeroom and I began to turn the pages of that book, and in 2 or 3 hours, I found out I'd turned the last page, and it seemed like it had gone, the time was only about 10-15 minutes. And I determined to reread it. I thought, well, I can't get everything out of it in this one reading, but I'll do it again. And I asked my father if he could have it, and interestingly enough, he said, I'd hope that you'd find that because it meant so much to me. My father was a great example to me of what an all-around good spiritual man should be. And his recommendation, finding out that he thought that he wanted me to, he'd hoped I'd find that kind of cemented something in me that I had done something kind of special that day. And it was very close to that time that I found the Daily Word in a laundromat, Unity's publication. And it was very special to me. So there was a convergence of things that happened in my life at one time. I found a book, I found the Daily Word, I found a friend who was a Christian Science practitioner, and for whatever you think of them, very, very positive people that always have good words to say. So I was speaking with, and I will never forget her, Margaret Simons Copper, wonderful Christian Science practitioner that I like very much. Didn't always agree with the ideas about medicine, but it was a relationship where I enjoyed learning and discussing spiritual principles. And I didn't know that the foundation was being laid for me to go into ministry at that time. I had no way of knowing that, and I would have denied it if somebody had said it. Well, I got interested in this book, and so I started reading more, and I sent away in Pauling, New York, for these little booklets that Dr. Peel would put out every month. I think it was called Plus Magazine. And I got the idea in my head that I needed to talk to this gentleman. And so I found the number to his church and decided to make a phone call. So I sat down and dialed the phone on one day, and I reached the secretary. I will never forget her name, Evelyn Yagilla. A very nice, patient woman, as it turns out. And I said, I'd like to talk to Dr. Peel. When I called, and she said, so would a lot of other people, and writing is best. But I didn't take that rejection. And I know she didn't mean it as a rejection, but I'd try again in a couple days. This went on for a number of months. It's like I just kept on persisting. I read the book. It said, keep on, don't give up, keep on in your quest. And it probably had been I'd called maybe 14, 15 times. And every time she would say, you can't do it right, or he's not available. One day I made a phone call, and she said, just a minute, I have another line to get. So I was thinking I'd drawn another blank. And then in about 10, 15 seconds, the voice on the other end of the line said, this Norman Vincent Peel. This way he talked. If an old oak tree could talk, that's how it sounded. And in my youthful exuberance, I said, oh no. And he said, oh yes. And all of a sudden, it was like the dog that's chasing the car catches the car. And I said, you wrote a great book. And he said, well, thank you. And I struggled to find my words because I had wanted to do this for so long, wanted to talk to him. And then when I finally did, I didn't have an idea what I was going to say to him. But he was kind, and he was very generous with his time, and we began to talk. And I found my words, and I said, I want you to know that your book has meant so much to me. At the time, I was in sales. And I said, you take a lot of rejection sometimes in sales, but I enjoy reading your words over and over again. And he asked me a little bit about my life. And it turns out that in the little church of La Vita in San Antonio, there was Reverend Paul Superset. And Dr. Peel had come down to dedicate the bells for that church. And I happened to live in the same house in which he had stayed during that time. And all of a sudden, there was something that bound us together. That was something otherworldly. I mean, there was no other way to talk about it or think about it but that. And he said at the end, I want to pray with you. And he said, you know what? He said, I like you, and I'd like to hear from you again. And I said, how often? And he said, well, I am busy, but if I'm busy, leave your number and I'll call you back. And he did in ensuing times. I learned a great deal from him. About that time, he went on the Phil Donahue show in 1984 and spoke about the universal love of God through Christ and the other enlightened masters, whether it be Buddha, Lao Tse, Confucius. He was not an exclusive, limited person about how he understood the love of God. And I found out that he was greatly influenced by one of our metaphysical teachers, Dr. Ernest Holmes, and was a great friend of unity and had spoken there many times and felt a kinship with New Thought, because indeed he brought New Thought really into the mainstream. He took it from the unity, science of mind, Christian Science churches, and developed positive theology that was accessible to everybody. He never spoke about anger or resentment or jealousy or vindictiveness or any of these attributes about God, because I believe he wasn't that. And you can't ascribe a motive to the Almighty that you don't have. The man, Dr. Peel, he loved people. And matter of fact, he said that Christianity really should be called Lovianity, because Christ was love. And there's a poignant story that I remember him telling, and I don't remember if it was something that he spoke of in a sermon or it was that I read in the book, but it speaks to the heart of the man and to his own father. As it turns out, Dr. Peel's father was a physician and a minister. And back in the early 1900s, they were called to, or the father was called to a place of what you would call now a house of ill repute. And he told his wife, Dr. Peel's father told his wife, that I want to take Norman with me, because what they called him there for was the young lady was laying dying. And evidently she had been in that trade and was now facing the end of her life. So the mother reluctantly let Dr. Peel's father take Norman with him to this place. And when they got there, they were ushered into a place that had very low lighting and a woman that was, a young woman that was obviously in the process of passing away. And Dr. Peel's father went up to her and said, I want you to know that I'm here to help you in any way you need. And she said, I've been a very bad person. Dr. Peel's father said, no, you may have made some unwise choices, but you're not a bad person because God made you. And she said, I'm scared to die. And he said, don't be, because God loves you. God forgives you. It's a very moving story. It reminds me of the time that I personally fell in love with Jesus Christ. And it was only till recently that I could talk about this and not get emotional. But it reminded me of the thief on the cross, where Jesus turned to one who was very scared and said basically, today you'll be with me in paradise. He didn't ask for a litany of the man's transgressions. He didn't say, you have to do this or embrace this dogma or do that. It was the love that Jesus had to give. Great master teachers like Dr. Peel and people like him, they extend love because that's what they have inside them to give. I've said, if it doesn't have love in it, I don't want anything to do with it. We have to be about that, because anything other than love is fear. And what Dr. Peel didn't know, I don't know that he knew this, when he said that Christianity was really lovianity, he was speaking to what the Course in Miracles talks about, that there are really two emotions, love and fear, and we're acting out of one of the two of those all the time. Dr. Peel was a great believer in forgiving yourself, getting up, and moving on. And recently, I went through a health challenge where I wanted to constrict. I wanted to pull back. I didn't really want to talk to anybody. I didn't know particularly why I had the challenge, but it weighed heavily on me. Until I remembered those words, believe in yourself, have faith in your abilities. That means even if I feel not so great, and I didn't feel very good, I remembered the scripture that said, let the weak say I'm strong. And I got up and I began to act in concert with what I was affirming in my mind, and pretty soon I was up and doing better. You see, we tend to believe what we tell ourselves. So it's not that the I am affirmations particularly work magic. They work magic in a way that's different than saying them by rote. It changes the mindset by tuning into the power that's already yours. I've seen it. I found it. I found it in this book to begin with. I found it in many ways through different pages. If you haven't read it, I heartily recommend that you do. And the friendship with Dr. Peel and I went on until his death in 1993, December 24th, 1993. So it was spanned a period of 9 years. And those phone calls I treasure. That time with him, even through distance, was something that meant so much to me in my life. He was so fundamental to my growth and development. And as were so many New Thought teachers that came after that. But this, Norman Vincent Peale was the one that introduced in large measure, New Thought to the church-going public. And so I'll tell you the takeaway from this. And this is, as I said, this is Dr. Peale's birthday. I think he would be something like 127, something like that, May 31st, 1898. But the takeaway from this is, that I would like you to have, is that I've said it in so many ways other times, love is all you are, and really that all that exists. And that when we harbor a grievance against ourselves, we're going to show it out there. And if we take personally what people do or say, and now realize that it's a reflection of where they are, and that we're tuning into them and their energy by getting upset by what they say, pull back and remember you run yourself. Now, this is probably sound like it's a little bit in your face. I don't mean that. I'm just very excited about it. I'm excited about it because it's meant so much to me. And I've seen it at work in my life. So remember, you believe what you tell yourself. So you might as well tell yourself the best things about yourself. As Dr. Peale said so many times, make a record of your successes. He talked about in a book, You Can If You Think You Can, a man named Rob Rowbottom. And he said to Rob, he said, you know, go stand on that bridge that you love to stand on. He had a place that he liked to be where the water went under it. And he said, think of your mistakes and the past as true water under the bridge. Never build a case against yourself. Because I'll tell you, there are people out there, the world is teeming with them, that will tell you, you can't do what you want to. You might as well not try. Give it up. There's a persistence factor. You have to keep on, and it takes some stamina to get up and keep going. You might as well feed yourself the best news you can about yourself and about the world. That's what I try to do every Sunday. I hope I succeed. I hope that I show people an enlarged view, a bigger idea of who they are. So much bigger than doctrine and dogma and things that divide us, and people who want to say things about the infinite because they're reading something literally. Certainly they're right, but they seem to their voice seems to be heard a lot more sometimes than the voices that talk about the calm, steady, loving presence that is always with us. That's what I would like for you to take away from this. Don't build a case against yourself. Persist, and especially at a time like this that we're going through this COVID, because we're not congregating, doesn't mean we're scared of this any more than you're scared of a traffic light, any more than you're scared of anything that you have caution about when you decide to walk around it. This is something that's happened in the relative world. We all have our opinions about what it means. I don't mind telling you mine. I believe it is a message from the universe to cooperate with one another, to love one another more, to come up higher, to address the needs that all of us have. You see, there's really a oneness, and it's not very difficult, I believe, to understand when we think of our brother and sister in large part as being just like we are, with the same fears, the same hopes, aspirations, ideals. It's pretty much the same. And we tune into a thought stream that tends to reflect back to us what we put out. And Dr. Peale talked about that. He wrote another book in 1982 called Positive Imaging. It was it seemed like all that he did was write bestsellers. And through him, and I guess this is a subject for another time, I met my mentor, Reverend Jack Boland, who spoke the words over my life on the telephone and said, J. Mulkey, you're going to be a minister. Do you believe it? And I said, of course not. And he said, will you let me believe it for you? And I said, if it helps, do it. What a thing to say. He did. And I'm here. I'm here because I heeded an unmistakable call years ago. And that call was to love people and to help build them into all they could be, and to embrace this wonderful thing called life with all of its challenges, all of its frustrations, all the scary parts, and all the parts that take our breath away, as a cohesive whole that we get to choose our attitude about, and therefore create our reality. Dr. Peel, I believe, would want his message, because I heard him say it many times, would want his message to be remembered in this way. Love yourself, love other people, scatter sunshine, forget yourself, the difficulties, the negative thoughts you may have. Speak well about everything and everybody for a week and see what happens. That was something that he said over and over again. And I will tell you that association has honored and blessed me that I have with Dr. Peel, and I am so honored that his family allows me to administer the Facebook page for that wonderful book, The Power of Positive Thinking, that meant and means so much to me. If you want a copy, you can get it online. It's at eBay. It was 1952. It's really readily available. It's on Kindle. Just be sure that when you get it, that you give it a chance. You open it. It looks very simple, but it's deceiving. There's a lot of depth to it, and you'll find yourself going back and looking at certain quotations, I believe, that speak to you in a certain way. Get it. If you can't get it, let me know. I'll get it for you. I'm that excited about it. It meant so much to me. And that little autobiographical detour that I made, that's that. But at least now, on his birthday, on Dr. Peel's birthday, I get to say how much he meant to me and what a wonderful man and friend he was. At this time in the service, it's customary for us to give gifts, and Unity of Boerne relies on financial contributions. All churches do. This is a difficult time for all of us. We have bills and obligations to make, expenses to meet, and so forth. So I invite you to give the most generous gift you can at paypal.me/Unity of Boerne. That's paypal.me/Unity of Boerne. And what we do in church is we will take our gift in our hand, and if we don't have our gift to put in our hand necessarily right away, we visualize it by taking our hands and clasping it together. And we know that what we give comes back to us in abundance. That's a law of the universe, and we honor that. And so right now, whatever you are thankful for, or whatever gift you have to put in your hand, I invite you to do it and hear these words. Divine love, through me, blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive, and I send it forth with my blessings and my love. And so it is. I want to speak just for a moment about recongregation at Unity of Boerne. I feel a great responsibility in this because I know that whatever decision is made at whatever time will not please everybody. But I want you to know that I am following the guidelines as laid down by the CDC and Texas Health Authority and the Kendall County Department of Health. I believe that our recongregation can happen fairly soon, but I would like to see the cases continue to go down. This is not, as I said, this is not about fear. This is about respecting something in a relative world. I believe that you'll be hearing more about our reopening as these days go forward, as I learn more, as you all that are members of Unity of Boerne and others give me your impressions and your ideas. I welcome them. I understand that this is a great responsibility, and I want you to know that I take it seriously. But we also know that this situation didn't come to stay. It came to pass. So we're affirming, we're believing, we're being the love that we are. We're being responsible. And I believe in acting in that fashion that we'll have the best possible result. Thank you for being here today and for listening to this. It's been my pleasure to speak to you. And now I'd like to recite our unity prayer of protection. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. Thank you for being here today. I give thanks for each one of you. And so it is. God bless you.